Welcome back to another episode of Alaska Reef. On this episode, we're going to be building a canopy for the 90-gallon reef that is in the dining room. Now, I know some of you are going to be saying, Brett, why are you tearing apart a perfectly good cabinet that you got from Lowe's? And the truth is, I had a couple of these cabinets left over from a remodel project that we were doing on a rental property. And so I figured instead of building a cabinet frame, I would just use the original frame that actually matched the type of cabinets that we have in our house. So these are Diamond Now cabinets, which match the shaker style of diamond cabinets that we have in our house. However, they are not the same size that I need to fit over the tank, so I'm just using the frame that actually has the doors. Here I'm actually marking out and I'm going to be making the box for the cabinet, and this is actually going to fit perfectly over the top of the tank. My wife and I are not big fans of floating canopies, so we wanted something that would actually fit over the top of the tank and yet looked like it matched really well with the rest of the cabinets in the kitchen and in the dining room. Something that you're going to hear me say throughout this video and throughout this entire series is that I am not a woodworker. And while I do have some tools that make my life easier, at the end of the day, I'm really not a woodworker. And so this was really outside of my element. Sure, I can do stuff around the house and do remodeling projects, and that's something that I've done a lot of. But when it actually comes to making cabinets, that's really not my forte. So here I'm using a 23 gauge nail gun to actually get some fine nails in here. I'm going to line these up, and once I get them lined up, I do apply a layer of glue between the original cabinet frame and the box that I'm making. Using the nail gun, I secure it while the glue dries. This is just stuff that I've picked up over the years from doing remodeling projects, and let's be really honest here, watching a whole lot of YouTube. Once I get the sides attached, I move on to the back, and I secure the back as well with both glue and with nails. I'm going to use this bar clamp to hold everything together while I get it lined up. And essentially this is making up the back of the canopy. And once I get everything nailed in here, I'm going to move on to the top. This little nail gun has actually proved to be quite useful. I've gone through a few different trim nail guns over the years for the remodel projects that I do, but that one I'm a big fan of. Here's one of those tools that I use to make me look like I'm a better woodworker than I really am. This is a Makita skill saw. This is actually a track saw. And so I can move that track pretty much anywhere I want to give me a really straight cut. Now, I'm sure there are people out there that are way more skilled when it comes to cutting this half-inch maple. But let's be real here. That Makita track saw makes life so much easier for people like me. All right, so I'm cutting down what is going to be the top of the canopy. And so I've actually gone ahead and laid that in there, put some glue between the joints. And now again, I'm using that 23 gauge nail gun to actually take care of holding this in place while the glue dries. Now I keep saying that. That's something I actually picked up from a couple of woodworking videos, that the nails are really not there for the structural support. The nails are there to allow the glue to dry. This is actually going to be what is going to be known as my false back. And I'm doing this because I want to be able to hide a lot of the electrical cords. I'm actually going to be having a Sonos speaker sitting on top of this canopy, and I don't want a gap behind the canopy. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting a false back in so I can actually hide my power cords, so that my canopy can go flush against the wall, but I still have room for my power cords to fall through. However, I really don't want those to be seen or to get salt creep on them. Once I got that in, I went through and I nailed in the boards that are basically going to support on the edge of the tank So that is actually what I'm nailing in right now, is where the canopy is going to rest on the tank. And I put one of these on each side. One of the issues I've had over the years when I've put canopies on my tank is that I've had moisture issues. Now I am running a chiller on this tank, so these are not going to be really used for cooling, but more just to get airflow over the top of the tank. So I'm going to be putting in a couple of, I believe these are 120 millimeter fans that I got from Cooler Guys. And so here I am measuring out and marking the circles that I need to cut. This is where you're going to see a tool come out that some people would deem very, very unnecessary. And that is the shaper origin. Now, I know that some of you are in the comments going to be saying, but Brett, I thought you said you're not a woodworker. What are you doing with a shaper origin? And the truth is, it was one of those things that I figured if I used a couple of times, it would make up for the price. So this is the shaper origin, and essentially it is a computer-aided cutting tool. And so I put those little stickers on, and if you look on the screen, all I have to do is maintain a little pointer within about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch of my original line, and the shaper itself will actually cut a perfect line all the way around. So I can draw the circle, the size of the circle that I want, and I can use the shaper origin to actually hold a perfect line as I go around, which for a non-woodworker like me is really great. I didn't want to have to make a template and then use a plunge router with, some form of bearing on it. This just made my life so much easier. I could cut any size circle that I wanted. I can use this for engraving. I can really use this tool for just about anything. And I will leave a link to the shaper origin in the comments below. However, I will tell you, it is really, really, really expensive. And it's one of those tools that, I bought a while back when I thought I wanted to get into woodworking. And to be very honest with you, I have actually not used it until this point. So this was my first project that I ever did with it. I'm sure my wife probably rolls her eyes when she sees what I paid for this thing to cut 2 4.5 inch circles. Anyway, so I got the one side done. I reset the shaper, laid out some more tape on the other side once I squared this all up, and I'm going to go ahead and cut the other side here in just a second. The way the shaper works is it has a camera on the front, and those little dominoes that are out there that I put as stickers down, those actually tell the shaper where to cut. And so it's actually a camera that is finding its place on your workspace based off of those dominoes. So once that was all cut out, I taped down the guards for the cooling fans, used my drill, and drilled a couple of holes in there to hold everything down. Basically, I'm using that so now I can attach my fans to the canopy and everything will line up. I drilled those undersize so that I can go through and make sure that they're a really, really good fit. I've had fans before when I tried to do this. They had a lot of play in them. At one point, I'll show you my other canopy to see what I dealt with before and how much of an upgrade this one really is. But in this picture, you could really see my my false back there. All right, so onto the front. Since the tank is wider than 36 inches, I mean, the tank itself is 36 inches, but you also have to add in 3/8 of an inch for glass. I actually had to make this canopy wider than the original frame for the cabinet. So the edge grain of this maple plywood is actually going to be showing on the face frame. And so here I'm using a Bondo product to basically build up a smooth finish on the sides of the end grain of that maple. The end goal here is that when this is all done, you won't be able to tell where the original cabinet frame ended and where the end grain started. All right, so once that's started drying, I've moved into the inside of the canopy. I'm actually now laying out where my lights are going to be placed. Now in this, I'm using the Hydra 64s. So I have two Hydra 64s. I found the center line of each of the Hydra 64s. And then I found the center line of my canopy, and I actually subdivided that center line. So basically I'm going to be putting this right in the center of each half of the canopy. So I have two lights, and they're both going to be centered on their own individual halves. From there, I'm going to go ahead and find the other center of the canopy. So I want to make sure that I have the dead center of the canopy, and then I'm going to make sure that these lights are centered on that center line as well. Since I didn't have a tool to really make this work, I just decided to use a straight level to make these lines. I marked them with a measuring tape first. And like I said, I found the center line of the Hydra 64 and lined them up. They're actually just a little bit inside of center because my goal here is to reduce the light scatter outside the tank. So if I remember correctly, 9 inches was technically on center. And so I think I put these both at 10 inches from the outside edge. Finishing marking my lines here, and then we're going to go ahead and get to actually mounting these. Now, I did some creative things here because the Hydra 64s don't really have any hardware that come with them. Rephrase that. Mine didn't come with any hardware. And so I actually had to figure out where the actual screw holes were in relation to the unit itself. And so what I ended up doing was I created this little block of wood. It's a straight block of wood, but I actually marked on the Hydra itself and then on this piece of wood where the actual screw holes were, so I could actually go through and make sure that when I do mark the holes that I have to drill, they're perfectly aligned with the Hydras themselves. And you're going to see what I'm talking about here in just a second after I get these placed in here, just to make sure it's a final fit, putting the power cords inside, and those are going to actually route through the back, through that little false wall that I created. But we want to make sure they're perfectly lined up. And once they're perfectly lined up, I'm going to go ahead and mark them. This is a little technique that I picked up from watching another person do their build. And this is the block that I'm talking about. Now, on that little block of wood, that little scrap of wood, I've actually marked where the holes are that I have to hit with these when I drill the holes into the canopy that are going to match perfectly into the Hydra. And I'm sure I'm going to get some comments that I could have measured this out and used a really precise measuring tool to do this. And you're right, 100% I could have done that. However, sometimes the simplest way is the easiest way, and that's exactly what I did. And we just went ahead and drilled a few of these holes, made sure that they all lined up. You can see the marks that I've made when I used that block. You can also see how I subdivided out that canopy in this shot. All right, the final test. Let's see, do they actually fit? And they do. Off to the second one. Let's see if this one fits. I'm going to be really honest here. I was pretty nervous at this point because I didn't use those precise measuring tools, but guess what? It worked. All right, on to the sanding. Now, I sped up the sanding because let's be real here. Who wants to watch me sand for the 2 hours that I ended up sanding this? I took it from 80 grit all the way up to 320 grit. This is probably the part that I was the most nervous about. And thankfully, I had the opportunity to do this first spray on the inside of the cabinet before I actually moved to the stuff that people are going to see. This is the Wagner Flexio 5000. And I had read so many reviews on so many different products on what to use for spraying cabinets specifically. The Flexio 5000, this video is not sponsored by Wagner in any way, shape, or form. So just know this is my real product review. The finish that I got with this product, it's an HVLP gun, high velocity, low pressure. So it's a great tool. I'm really happy with it. The finish that I ended up getting, you'll see the final product here. It is really a great tool. It saved me a ton of time. Now, thankfully, I do have some spraying experience, but most of the spraying that I've done in the past has been with big airless sprayers that are done, for a remodel when I'm painting a house or I'm painting a room. This is where the fun really begins. And I keep saying that I'm not a woodworker. And this is where I really kind of kicked things up. I needed to get crown molding to match the rest of my cabinets in my house. The problem was the supplier couldn't get me crown molding to my house for like 6 to 8 weeks. And so I decided to try to make my own. For someone that does woodworking all the time, this isn't that big of a deal. But for me, this is a huge deal because I don't do woodworking all the time. So you can see that blue piece of crown that is sitting kind of out of screen there. That is the crown that I am trying to match. And so I used my table saw and I actually cut an exact replica of the crown that is on the rest of my cabinets. So after doing some off-camera gluing, I actually ended up putting a nailer board on the back side of it and then mounting this to the top of the cabinet. And truthfully, I think it turned out pretty darn good. Here I am using my least favorite caulking gun in the world. I genuinely don't know why I still have that thing. It leaks like crazy. I guess I refuse to replace it. But I think after this project, I think I'm finally done with it. I think it's time to buy a new $13 caulking gun. All right, so we've got the caulk done, and now it's time to get into spraying the final finish. And again, we're using the Flexio 5000 here. Thankfully, I had some practice on the inside, and here we are moving to the outside. This cabinet finish is the exact same finish that I have on my cabinets in my house. And so I went to Lowe's, and I had Lowe's actually match my color on my cabinets in my house. So these are the uppers, I should say. The lower cabinet is called Mount Etna, and it is Maritime by Diamond. So Sherwin-Williams doesn't actually make Maritime, so you actually have to get kind of creative. The one that was the perfect match was called Mount Etna. We'll get to that when we do the stand build. But for now, this is called Icy Avalanche. Yeah, Icy Avalanche. So I spray my cabinet doors when they're laying down horizontally. This is a trick that I picked up from another YouTuber because you have gravity working in your favor. All right, and here is the final couple of shots of the canopy. The doors are drying. They're looking real good. Like I said, I paint them flat because I have gravity working in my favor. I can put a lot of paint on them without it running. And there you go, the final product. Doors are on. They're going to be more adjusted once we actually have this on the tank. You can see the nailer board that I used to put the crown on the top. The fans are mounted. And let's go ahead and actually show you inside this thing because that's where I think the magic lies. But before I do that, are there some imperfections? Yeah, but can you tell? No, and truthfully, my wife came out, she saw it, she was real happy about it, so I'm going to go ahead and call this a win. Let's go ahead and open these cabinet doors so you can actually see what we've got inside of them. But first, let's point out these cooling fans. That's the ones we cut on the Shaper Pro, and those fans are done by Cooler Guys. And those actually came off of my other canopy, and you can see the difference between the new canopy and the old one. Look at those holes that I cut without the Shaper. That was done with like a Sawzall. And while the overall canopy looked pretty good before, this was just kind of half thrown together, and I wasn't really happy with the final product. And you can just see the difference between the two canopies right now. All right, let's finally open these doors and show you what I'm talking about inside. I took the liberty to actually get the lights mounted in there. And I also took the liberty to get the fans mounted in there. We're waiting on one bracket still, and this is going to hopefully come from Amazon this week. And that one final bracket is actually going to be to lift those cables right there. It's going to be lifting those up and holding those up. But I'm also waiting on a USB cable that is going to connect my USB powered fans to my Apex. The inside is painted bright white. The inside of the doors are painted bright white. The outside is icy avalanche. And the final alignment on the doors will be done once the canopy is actually on the tank. So that is the canopy build that we did. Thank you for joining in on this project. I'm going to show you one more glamour shot here of the final product. If you want to see what we're going to do with the stand, make sure to join us on our next episode. If you learned something out of this or just want to follow along on the project, please make sure to subscribe. We'd love to have you along. If you liked this video and want to see more videos like it, go ahead and click the bell icon, and that will let you know whenever I launch a new video. You guys have a great rest of your day, and thanks for joining along.